Welcome, everybody, to episode 23 of UnHacked, where we empower busy and overwhelmed business owners. Brian, do you identify as a busy or an overwhelmed business owner?
Is that a joke?
Exactly. Where we empower busy and overwhelmed business owners who are also concerned about cybersecurity to outsmart Russian hackers. Listen, I say Russian hackers mostly tongue-in-cheek, but a lot of them, that is where a lot of this stuff originates. So I've even named mine, by the way. I stole the name, Boris Grushenko. I've never seen the movie, so I don't know how to pronounce it. It's a James Bond movie. Anyways, I digress. So I am good. Justin Shelley, CEO of Phoenix IT Advisors. I work with businesses in Texas, Northern Nevada, Utah, Idaho, kind of all over the place. But we help people stay away from these Russian hackers. Brian, you're here with me today. Mario's absent, so we're going on without him. But Brian, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, my name is Bryan Lachapelle with President and CEO of B4 Networks, and I work with businesses in the Niagara region to improve their operations using and leveraging technology.
Canada, yeah.
In Ontario, Canada.
I've been there once, I didn't get to come see you, so I've got to make another trip back up to Canada.
Yeah, and, September, October, maybe we'll do a, what do they call those? A
retreat?
No, run.
Marathon. A marathon. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Cross-border one too.
That would be amazing. All right.
Yeah.
It's a deal. Okay, so in today's episode, we're going to talk about how to protect your business from bank fraud. This is getting complicated. There's a lot of it out there. So we're going to go over that. Of course, we have to break down the infamous CrowdStrike event. I can't imagine that anybody anywhere has not heard of this and probably has been impacted in some way, shape, or form. Then we're going to wrap up with our as always, the formula for how to protect your business 100% from Boris Grushenko. All right, let's jump in. Brian, first of all, CrowdStrike. What the hell? Tell me a little bit about what happened, who it happened to. Don't get into finances yet, but because we're going to come back to that. But let's just, what the hell?
Well, the computer's broke. No, I'm just kidding. So essentially, long story short, cybersecurity provider CrowdStrike put out an update. Update broke almost every computer that the update went on to, and that required businesses to, or first of all, it required businesses to hopefully have a backup plan, like to be able to continue their operations manually, but required IT providers to have to visit every workstation manually, one at a time, in order to restore.
Which we don't do anymore, right? Most of what we do is remote, and you couldn't do this one remote. You couldn't do it in bulk. Impact. Now, I heard this. Tell me if you've heard the same. That this is historically the largest computer outage that we have record of. Have you heard that too?
That's what I'm hearing as well. Thankfully, we weren't impacted whatsoever because we don't use CrowdStrike, but it could have happened to us just as easily because at the end of the day, we all use security vendors, and
right.
It could have happened to anybody.
Yeah, this is definitely not, well, I was going to say it's not a dig at CrowdStrike, but
no.
We'll come back to that. I actually was going to start this episode off with no shit, there I was. Cool breeze out of the south, not a cloud in the sky. You know how every good story starts that way. Because I shit you not, I'm getting ready to go out of town. I'm going to be gone for 10 days, and I've got to pay some bills, and I've got to bill my clients before I go. And I'm sitting here, and I go onto my my portal where clients pay me, and it's down. I'm like, what the hell? Okay. I mean, my first panic was like, did I not pay them? Like, what happened? How did I get locked out of my own payment portal?
Whoops.
Yeah, so I start panicking. I'm like, all right, well, at least I've got to get this other bill paid. I had to go onto Microsoft and update a credit card on Microsoft, right? And I get on there, and I'm getting errors from Microsoft. I'm like, what the hell? So then I go, is it Down Detector? Is that the website? Are you familiar with that one?
No.
Okay, downdetector.com it's just like a live report of major businesses that are having outages reported by end users, by the way. This isn't necessarily them self-reporting. And I look at that, and it's like, everything's down. I mean, everything. I was like,
wow,
shit. And I'm sitting here with my business partner / COO / life partner. And I'm like, Leanna, this is bad. This is going to be big. It's going to be huge. And then we just went out of town. So,
Yeah.
but I didn't, Brian, I had no idea how bad it was going to be when I said
I
that.
I knew the moment I woke up, because like I don't necessarily get up very early, but all I kept hearing is ding, 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 and I'm like, okay, seriously, nothing can be that important. Ding, 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 and my phone was just going off. Like people were chatting back
Yeah.
and forth about it, not just within B4 Networks, but also, all the different associations and groups that I'm part of, and it was just like flooded of messages. I couldn't even keep up with everybody talking about it and the impact, and I was, just like crossing my fingers that we weren't going to be impacted, because you never know where and who's
Right.
using different
Right.
vendors. And so thankfully,
Yeah.
knock on wood, none of my vendors and none of my clients were affected, but yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
people were.
I mean, direct impact is, so I was affected to an extent, right? I couldn't pay my bills. I couldn't charge my clients. There was stuff like that, but that was pretty temporary. But the overall, if we look at the global impact of this thing, have you seen any numbers as far as financial impact?
Billions.
Yeah.
They haven't finished tabulating it all, and that's not including lawsuits, right? So
Right. Is it Delta Airlines? I think is the first ones to initiate a lawsuit. So it's beginning. I imagine it'll turn into class action, and it's going to be ugly. It's going to be messy. But yeah, billions. Delta was claiming 500 million, just them, just the airline, and that's just one client. God. Anyways, okay, so lessons learned. I want to move into that. I mean, unless you have anything else to talk about as far as impact.
Well, no, I think lessons learned are going to be huge, but like just talking about the financial aspect, since we're on that topic already, you can't expect that even if you were impacted, that your cyber insurance is going to cover this type of interruption, because it's not a cyber security incident. It's a cyber like update. Like there was no intrusion. It was just
right.
an update gone wrong, right?
This is not a breach. Yeah, and I should have specified that because this is a cybersecurity podcast. This is not a cybersecurity incident.
Well, I mean, it's an incident, but it's surrounding cybersecurity, but it's not a breach. It's nobody was breached as part of this, but the impact of it was because we have to do updates on a fairly regular basis, and in some cases 4, 5, 6 times a day, and the updates aren't always able to be tested in a very robust way. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't. It just sometimes things happen. So all that to say, long story short, whether or not these companies are going to be able to successfully sue for this breach, or this incident, I have a hard time believing anybody is going to be able to get paid out for this, because honestly, they should have internal systems and processes internally to prevent this stuff from happening. As an example, updates are, the vendor should have, notified and or should have put out a fully tested update, but the client also shouldn't be updating every single computer in their entire network without doing a test case before. So,
correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't. And again, I'm not a CrowdStrike customer.
Neither am I.
You said not direct impact, but what I've read is that this wasn't an update that was really testable. It was something that just gets pushed, because with cybersecurity, because it's time sensitive, not all updates, you don't have control over all of these updates. I don't know that this is one people had control over.
I don't know.
I mean, it's a great reminder to do exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I know in most cases with our security products, we can push out, like, hey, we're going to push this update out to these 10, test bed cases or test workstations that we have internally. Then we move on to another, 10, 15 across, all of our clients. And when we've confirmed everything's good, then we start rolling it out, first 5 clients, next 5 clients, we never just blanket go, hey, here's an update. Let's just push it to everybody and see what happens. Right? So I don't know if this was the case with CrowdStrike, because you're right. Some security vendors, you don't necessarily have full control over when and how the updates will be released, but it's still a shared responsibility.
That process you described is definitely how you handle Microsoft patches, right? And again, without any direct impact, I didn't see this happen personally. But one thing I heard discussed was that this may have been a patch that was pushed out without anybody's
Consent.
oversight or consent, or
Gotcha.
even the ability to test it. I don't know if that's true or not, but it does raise a lot of interesting questions.
Yeah, and like you said, it could have been a high, or was certainly a high sensitive update, and so sometimes you don't want those to go through a robust testing phase, because it's got to get out there, because the damage that could be done left unchecked is worse than
Right.
than the alternative.
Which, and again, hearsay, reading in the forums, because by the way, this is blown up. I mean, everywhere you go, we're reading from people who are personally impacted by it, whether that's Reddit or just news articles or whatever. But I am reading comments from people in the trenches. And one of the things that I understand is that this update there was no quality control within the vendors' processes. So that, I think, is where the lawsuits are going to land.
Right.
TBD. Right.
And the fact that they had deep, and I'm not going to use terms, but they had deep access into Microsoft's root systems that most vendors wouldn't have access to. And for example, in a Mac environment, that's not even available to security vendors. It's completely locked down. And so, is that something that Microsoft's going to do as well down the road? Because they were forced to open it up due to a lawsuit in Europe. Now they might use this as a case to go back and lock that down from a security perspective, saying, here we had this incident, it impacted millions. The benefits don't outweigh the risks, so we're locking it down.
And here's just my own musings, shall we say. If this update had such a dramatic, I haven't seen it. I'm inferring this, that it was 100% failure rate. If you got the update, your machine was tanked.
That was my understanding.
Which tells me, this is just Justin's philosophy, that it wasn't tested at all.
Right.
Like, it wasn't rolled out to a machine at all, or it would have bricked that machine. Not bricked, blue screened, but you know what I mean? Like, so these are my questions. This is where I want to watch the fallout. I want to see how the lawsuits take place, because when you put that much trust in a vendor who has this much of a market share, like they are a huge vendor, to not have any kind of a process for testing before they roll it out like that, unheard of, unreal, absurd. God, I'd love to be wrong, because that's scary. That's terrifying. And with that, I do want to transition into, what do we learn from this? I talk a lot about how do we make this happen to somebody else? How do we not be the low-hanging fruit? Because bad things are going to happen. And this is a case where all the stuff we talk about, the industry standards, best practices, insurance, like all that stuff kind of falls short here. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you agree? Like, how could you have prevented this? I don't think it was preventable. How could you cover it financially? I don't know. I mean, you mentioned before we started recording, insurance companies probably aren't going to pay out on this.
If you have business interruption, they might.
Correct.
But on cybersecurity only,
it's not cyber.
I don't think so. No,
it's not cyber. So what would you tell? You're sitting in front of a client or a prospect, and they're saying, "Hey, Brian, what could I have done to prevent this?" What would you tell them?
Well, the first thing I would say is, okay, we probably won't be able to prevent that type of issue, but what we can do is plan for its inevitability. It's going to happen, right? Clients will be breached, clients will get updates, clients will have blue screens. That, like, it will happen. It's a matter of if or when, not if. And so, from my perspective is, and we do incident response planning all day long with a lot of different clients, and what always seems to get left out of the incident response plan, because it requires 100% of the client's responsibility, because it's there on their hands, is when this occurs, when there's a failure, when there's an outage, how am I going to keep my business running in the meantime?
Right.
How am I going to make sure that people get paid, so I have a second alternate method of being able to send money or receive money? How am I going to continue to have transactions, place orders, make orders, fulfill orders? Right? What are my manual processes? And you and I had an incident not too long ago, maybe a couple of months ago, where a hotel was breached, and they, I mean, from my perspective, they did a great job.
It was phenomenal. Yeah, within a couple of days, again, I've said this before too, I wouldn't have wanted to be there at ground zero, when it happened, because I'm sure it was a disaster. But yeah, they seem to have had a plan, or they came up with one very quickly.
Right.
And that's so critical, and yet, like you said, so frequently left out of the plan.
Yeah. So, like the first thing I would say to a client is ask yourself, if I had no access to any of my technology, what can I have in place in advance? Whether if I run a doctor's or office, maybe I have a printout of all my appointments coming up. If
Right.
I run like an IT firm like us, maybe I have a list of all my clients, their phone numbers, and contact details, so I could at least reach out to people if I got breached. I won't have access to my systems to be able to look at those things, right? So having different ways and different means of being able to do different things, such as processing payments. Maybe you have a primary vendor that you use day to day. Maybe you have a secondary one that you can access that might not be as integrated into your systems, but you can still
Exactly.
continue to accept payments by some manual process. Maybe you have forms you've printed to continue to place orders, and you can write those orders down on paper. Maybe you every day you print out your entire inventory at the end of the day, so tomorrow if there's a breach that happens overnight, you have the inventory list of all the parts and things that you have available to sell, in some sort of manual way. I don't know what, because every business will be unique, but ask yourself, how can I continue to operate without my technology? Like sort of going back, 50, 60, 70 years pre-technology, what would you have done?
Yeah.
Put those in place now so you have them.
Right. Yeah, a critical part, because most of the incident response plans are about how we get back up online, how we do
Right.
damage control, how we do PR, how we do legal. But
Yeah.
like, what about
And
how
all
do we
those are
do
great.
business? Yes, but
Those
how do
are
we
a
do
lot of those.
business?
Yeah. How do we continue? Because money's got to keep flowing, right? We got to
Right.
keep going, because the impact on your clients, once they feel it, they may be inclined to go, you know what? Maybe it's time for me to look somewhere else. Maybe I'll use this opportunity, because XYZ company weren't able to fulfill my needs. I still have needs to fulfill, and I'm going to go somewhere else.
Right.
Right. And look at that. I got way better service here all of a sudden from this, than I normally get. I might just switch completely 100% forever. And then you've just lost business, right? So you want to be able to continue to supply your customers and or patients and or whatever it is you do throughout the incident while you're recovering.
Well, yeah, and I mean, to kind of add to what you're saying, it's like this stuff's expensive. So if you also can't bill and conduct business, not only do you have the cost of the downtime, the cost of the recovery, um, like you've got to have that money rolling, and you can't have
Yeah.
that financial gap in there. So
And you may even have a requirement in your insurance business interruption policy that, look at that, you didn't have any manual system set up at all. Well, we're not going to cover the losses that would have occurred if you had those systems in place, because due diligence says you should have done that. And I'm not saying your policies have that. I'm saying they might, because if I was writing a policy, I would certainly put that kind of language in there.
yeah,
Hazard a guess, the insurance brokers and underwriters have thought that through and went, well, we're going to have business interruption, but it's going to be limited if you don't have the manual systems in place.
and that, just talking about insurance, this is also just a reminder of, know your policies. I would argue know your agent, your insurance agent, and communicate with them frequently, and introduce them to your whoever's handling your technology. Make sure that everybody's on the same page. That'll help in a payout if you need to, because the insurance company's job, by the way, is not to pay out; it's to protect
Exactly.
the investors.
They want to keep their money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So know your policy.
They want to keep your money, not theirs.
Yeah. I mean, listen, that's we're all in business to make money. I don't fault the insurance companies for not wanting to pay out, but make sure that you are covered, so that in this event, in these unpreventable events, which there are so few of, make sure that you're going to be taken care of financially as well. So,
yeah.
Listen, I could probably go on all day about CrowdStrike, just because it's been our world now for I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But I think those are the main points. I don't want to bore our audience too much with any more tech talk. So let's go to our tip of the week, and we're going to talk today about bank fraud. This is something I learned. It's been a while now, but I was kind of a little surprised by it. The whole FDIC, this bank is FDIC protected or whatever. And you don't have that in Canada, right? Do you have something else?
We have something similar. So we have a depositors insurance.
Okay.
But it's limited as well, right? So in a case of a business, I believe it's $100,000. So if you have like $1 million in your bank, their exposure that the banks are limited to is from an insurance point of view is very, very minimal.
And is yours the same? So here in the States, the FDIC protects against a bank that goes insolvent or out of business, right? It doesn't protect from any kind of fraud. It's
Same.
just if the bank goes under.
Right.
So that feels warm and fuzzy. But when you get hacked, when somebody uses your computer or your identity or some other way to transfer money out of your bank account, that doesn't mean anything. FDIC means nothing.
Right. And even the banks will have policies typically in place that if they came in with your credentials, bypassed any kind of two-factor authentication or whatever because you gave the code out or whatever reason how they bypassed it, you're usually on the hook. They're like, at least there's been reports here in Canada as well that, they got in using your login and password and they provided the text message that was sent to the phone. And so, they use a legitimate way to get in, and that's on you to keep those protected. And of course, hackers use social engineering all the time to try to trick you, right? They might call you and say, "Hey, I'm from the bank, XYZ. I'm going to send you a code, to prove who I am. Just read the code back to me." And of course, it's not really that. They're just trying to log into your account and get access to your bank details. So the code that you give them is actually the code for them to log in, right?
And that's crazy because banks sometimes do that exact same thing legitimately, where they'll say, "Okay, to verify who you are, I'm sending you a code. Read it to me." I've had that happen. So, that's I don't like that.
Now they put in right into the code, like, do not give this out to anybody who asks for it. This is strictly for you to put in directly into your, at least that's what they do.
But I'm saying over the phone, I've been on the phone where they say, "I need to verify who you are. I'm going to text you." And I mean, in a legitimate scenario, which I don't like that they do that.
Mm-mm.
So, listen, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad about banks. I have gone in prepping for a webinar one time. I called up my bank and I'm like, "Hey, what happens if I get breached, or what happens if money gets wired?" And this person was very dismissive. I was not impressed at all. And then I said, "Well, do you have any training or any tips or anything about how do I protect myself?" And they still came up short. They didn't have anything for me, and I was really upset with that. The flip side is I have personally met with bankers, like walk into the branch, talk to a human. I've done seminars, joint venture seminars with banks. And I can tell you that the people care.
Yeah.
The system does not. The system gives no fucks about you or your money. But when you talk with the people, so this would be like my maybe my top 2 list as far as how to protect is get to know your banker, the human that lives and works in your town at your branch, and ask them, like, what should I do? Find out what their system does, what protections they have, and then take that information and make sure that you have all of your account settings and alerts configured properly. So, for example, if I try to wire money right now, my bank will send me a text that I have to put into the website to send that, or I have to physically walk into the branch.
And mine knows that if there's a wire, I'm physically required to be present with ID in order to prove that I want that wire, because I don't do wire transfers. It's very, very rare I ever have to do one. So I physically have to be in bank in order to do mine, which is fine.
Right.
But
going
like off of what you're saying, there's alerts and bank settings and things like that. In most cases, you have the ability to have a commercial banking system that essentially has checks and balances. So, for example, my bookkeeper, or the person who takes care of sending money in my place to all of our vendors, they can't approve things on their own. They can set everything up, but then I got to go in and say approve, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so you can have systems like that where they have like limitations on how and what they can do. They can't just randomly add people to to do direct payments to, or we call them email money transfers. I don't know what you guys have there, but direct debit, things
ACH.
like that. Yeah. And so in most cases, you can have like a dual approach where one person can do the setup and the other person has to approve, and vice versa. So you have to have 2 people. So somebody breaching your security, getting logins and passwords, we actually have to get 2 different people's logins and passwords in order to be able to affect any kind of transaction, right? So that's one of my recommendations for things that you can do.
Yeah. So I mean, recapping that, know your banker, know how to deal with it, get policies set up, both internal policies, because is your bookkeeper an internal employee or is it outsourced?
So it's a combination of a couple things. Our day-to-day
Okay.
stuff is an internal employee, and then we have somebody outsourced that takes care of stuff. They'd have no access to any of our banks. So
Okay.
they have read-only logins to be able to go download all the transactions, but not every bank has that. Like small business banking in Canada does not have, in most cases, a system that allows you to create users that have read-only access. The commercial banking that I have does. So I would recommend those.
Okay, so now we're at another point that I didn't even have in the notes, but like make sure you're using the right bank. Make sure that the bank you're using is, has all these features and settings and policies available. So have internal policies. Train your employees who are touching money or have any knowledge. Vendors, and I think the other one we need to touch on is vendors and clients, like who we pay and who we are paid by.
Right. So for example, if you're receiving money from a client or a vendor, you receive payments from anybody, you should have already let them know how to pay you in advance, but you should already also let them know if this is going to change, you have to confirm it verbally with us as well. So we'll send you a notice saying, hey, this is how we're going to change or update our banking information. That could be on your invoices and or however. But it should always be confirmed verbally with somebody in your office. So that's on them. If they receive a message from claiming it's from you, changing the banking information, and they don't call you to confirm the information and they send it somewhere else, depending on how it came in, it may be your responsibility if it came from your systems and your email, or it might be their responsibility if it came from some sort of phishing attempt or some sort of spoofed email or whatever the case may be.
Right. So I mean, this is one that we could talk about probably more, but I'm trying to keep it relatively short so that it's still somewhat interesting. But man, know your procedures and get them reviewed. Get somebody else to make sure that what you're doing is the right thing, and communication. Too often it's after the fact, and I've seen this personally where there's a breach or there's a scare, and then all of a sudden the policies get put in place.
Yep.
Do it now.
I'll give you an example of how silly it is, because it might be something that you need to reconfirm with people on a regular basis. So I'm an IT company, right? We're knee deep into technology and security and all day long. About 5 or 6 years ago, I had a marketing person working for me, and she must have received an email, supposedly from me, it wasn't from me, asking her to buy gift cards. We all know the age-old scam. Go buy these gift cards. So she looks at me and she says, "Well, Brian," because I was walking by, she goes, "Brian, where do you want me to buy these gift cards from?" And I was like, "Wait, what?" She goes, "You just sent me an email." I'm like, and she would have done it had I not been there in the office, right? She would have figured it out how to get these things, because they put a lot of pressure on you. These people who
Tell me, I might have missed it. What was the job function of this employee?
She was a marketing person.
Marketing,
right? And so it had nothing to do with finance, not attack, not finance. But I had inadvertently, I know that you should never have, but I never instructed my marketing person to, hey, listen, if somebody says you buy a gift card, don't do it, right? So now we have obviously a security training program in place that everybody gets this type of information on a regular basis. But, as an oversight 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't even think about that, right?
Okay, so I'm adding to my list, because this was 4 tips, then it was 5, now 6. It's 6, because security training is key. And I'll match your story, but mine was a tech.
Oh no!
I mean, I had a technician message me.
Know better.
Saying, "Hey, where do you want?" Yeah, same thing. Where do you want me to get these gift cards or whatever? I'm like, what?
At least he checked with you though, directly versus back replying to the email.
Yes, but damn, he should know better.
Reply to the email. Where do you want me to get them? Is this really you? I've got that one before where somebody replies back saying, "Is this really you, Brian?" What do you think is going to happen if it's?
Nope, you caught me.
Yeah, no, it's not me. And the criminal's obviously going to say yes.
Oh my god, crazy.
Too funny.
Yeah, get the security training in and make it mandatory. Make it part of your culture. We did an episode on this already, so again, try not to beat a dead horse too much, but hugely important. Right. So, listen, we've been at this for coming up on a half an hour. I was toying with whether or not, because I'd like to add just a general business tip to our
Yeah.
weekly podcast. And I was going to talk about one thing, but I'm gonna pivot, Brian, because
Sure.
I want to talk about getting in shape.
Oh,
Well, so okay, I'm going to go through the whole
well,
thing. Be the face of your company. I started
yeah,
off intentionally hiding myself from the business because I didn't want
right.
people to get tied to me emotionally. Honestly, I wanted to be able to go on vacation without people demanding to talk to me, right? So I made
Yeah,
a very corporate looking and feeling structure, and that was 15 years ago or whatever, to today where my picture is on the face of the website, all social media. I'm doing podcasts. I'm writing a book. Like everything now is the opposite. I do want to be the face of the company, right?
why is that? Why is it important for you to be the face of the company? Like, I know why. I know what the
I know
reasons why
you're
I
just
want to.
prodding me because
Yeah,
people don't do business with entities and corporations, and
right.
they do business with people, and not just people, but people they like. No
Yeah,
trust and like. You have to have that connection,
yeah,
or in order to gain that trust and have that I mean, ultimately, it's because it's a relationship.
yeah.
We're humans, and this is a relationship. So,
That's right.
yeah. So that was the tip, and then we just kind of started talking about. I think you said, well, you just mentioned a minute ago, let's run a marathon together, and
Yeah,
you've
yeah,
been going to the gym like a beast. I think an
yeah.
hour a day or some nonsense, right?
Well, sometimes an hour and a half. It all depends. But
Yeah,
it was all, and mostly at the beginning. Nowadays, I might go like 3-4 days a week. But the intent was to get back into shape, get back into um, a healthier state of body and mind.
yeah,
Because for a long time there, I was, I think I was creeping up on almost 270 pounds. Down 70 now, like around 195. And I was like feeling really tired and lethargic all the time, and obviously business was impacted because of it, because I didn't have
right.
the mental capacity, the mental energy, physical energy to be able to keep up with what was going on, and it definitely affected business, affected our clients, affected our employees, and general mood around the office. And I find now, now that I've been going and exercising, I'm more awake, more everything, more, lot better sleep, a lot more energy, be able to keep up with things, be able to think faster on my feet. It's insane.
Yeah, yeah, it's huge, and I have to confess, I'm kind of tattling on myself. That's why I wanted to bring this up, because
Yeah,
I used to run marathons. On demand, I could run a half marathon. I had to train for a full, but on demand, I could run a half marathon with no
crazy.
preparation, and I let everything go. There are a lot of reasons which I'm not going to get into,
Yeah,
but I let myself go to the point where now I cannot even run a 5K without stopping and gasping for air, and
for
possibly
now.
collapsing on the sidewalk in the fetal position and crying. So, yeah, it's time to get back into shape. I'm going to try CrossFit. I've never done it before, but I'm going to do that as kind of a cross training. And then I do plan to run the Chicago Marathon in just a little over a year. So I'm going to give
Excellent.
myself a little time, but because you're right, excuse me, I can see and feel a difference. I see it in the mirror, but
Yeah,
the feeling, the sluggishness and whatever
I think
is
clients
kind
can
of
see it, right?
absolutely. Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it's time. It's time. So I'll be reporting back in a future episode on how that goes.
So that's our weekly
Um,
business tip: be the face of
that's
your
our weekly,
company and get in
and
shape.
make that face look good, right? I mean,
Yeah,
listen, if you're going to be the face, you look decent. Take care of yourself.
yeah.
Trim up your beard, for example. Oh shit, I didn't do that today. Yeah. Well, it's
You look
time to.
beautiful, Justin. You're
Thank
good.
you, thank you. All right, let's wrap this up, Brian. Um, I'm kind of proud of this formula that's kind of evolved, at least in my brain, as we've done this podcast. I used to run with this 97% number.
Yep.
I stole it. I didn't come up with it. I can, unscientifically validate it, that you can prevent 97% of breaches with best practices. Just do the
Just
basics,
basic
take care
best
of the stuff we
practices.
talk about. You're 97% good. So protect your technology, protect your data, and protect your people. Do
Right.
that right. Follow the best practices. Probably you want to hire us to do that for you, because this is not a self-help kind of thing.
No.
It's very complicated, very difficult. But with that in place, you're 97% there. But I don't like that. I don't like having that 3% lingering. And so the wrap up the formula, it's kind of what we were talking about earlier. policies and procedures, review them, update them, and champion those things within your organization. Don't just put them on a shelf. And then get a good insurance policy and know your insurance agent, right?
And your policy and procedures, not just during, but or after or before an incident, but like during. Like, what are you going to do to continue your business going, right? That's also part of it.
Right, and that's just the one. That's just the incident response plan. But you've got, how do you want your employees using technology that you provide them? Do you want to allow them on social media? Do you want to allow them to download files? There's a lot of things that need to be thought through from a business perspective and then put into paper, signed off by an attorney and trained on. So, don't just hand an employee a stack of papers when you hire them that's 100 pages long, make them sign it and think you're good.
Forget all about it.
For fuck's sake, you come back a year later, they don't know what they read. They just wanted the job. They're trying to get a paycheck. That's stupid. So that's dumb. But anyways, that is what I genuinely believe. If all those things in place, we are now at 100%. My attorney and my insurance company both will not let me say it's 100%. So I'm just like, this is my personal opinion. It has nothing to do with whatever fine print.
Yeah.
But that helps me sleep at night, having all that in place. That makes me very comfortable. So that is how I roll personally. That is what I do for my clients. Brian, do you have any final thoughts or takes on that formula or anything else we've talked about today?
No, I think that wrap up is pretty good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. That deep summary.
Yeah. Oh, get 1% better every day.
There we go. All right. That's at least something. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. As always, go to unhacked.live and schedule a free assessment. We can work with you on all of this stuff, and much of this will be free. We'll do an assessment. We'll give you a full roadmap. We'll show you what needs to be done. And then you can hire us to implement for you. You can self-implement, or you can take it to your tech team and say, do this, right? Do this. So unhacked.live. That's it, guys. We're going to wrap up and we will see you next week. Take care. Brian, thanks for being here.
Cheers. Thanks.